30,000 men defeated 150,000. A single night's cavalry charge shattered the world's most feared army. One prince's understanding of terror forced history's greatest conqueror to retreat. This isn't fantasy. This is what happened when Vlad the Impaler faced the Ottoman Empire at Târgoviște in 1462. Picture this: 7,000 horsemen charging into a camp of 150,000 Ottoman soldiers. The survival of Christian Europe hung in the balance that June night. By the end of this video, you'll understand how medieval warfare's greatest upset happened, why the conqueror of Constantinople fled from a minor prince, and what terrible price was paid for this impossible victory. I'll reveal 3 crucial secrets: the reconnaissance mission that made victory possible, the horrifying sight that broke an invincible army, and the personal connection between hunter and prey that changed everything. You might think 5-to-1 odds mean certain defeat. The Ottoman Empire had crushed kingdoms with far better chances. Their sultan, Mehmed II, had conquered the unconquerable Constantinople just 9 years earlier. His army of elite janissaries, massive cannons, and endless reinforcements had never met true defeat. Against them stood Vlad III of Wallachia, 30,000 farmers, minor nobles, and mercenaries defending a principality smaller than modern-day South Carolina. No one gave them a chance. But here's where it gets insane. Vlad had spent years as a hostage in the Ottoman court. He knew their routines, their language, their tactics. He understood something about his enemy that would prove more valuable than any army. What Mehmed didn't know was that he wasn't just invading a country. He was walking into a trap designed by someone who understood Ottoman thinking better than his own generals. To understand how this impossible victory happened, we need to go back to where the hatred began. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of history's most decisive battles, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic war content. Now, let me take you back to medieval Wallachia, where terror was about to become a weapon of war. The boy who would become Vlad the Impaler spent 4 years in Ottoman captivity. From age 11 to 15, he lived in Mehmed's court as a political hostage, insurance for his father's loyalty. While his younger brother Radu charmed their captors, Vlad watched. He memorized guard rotations, studied military protocols, learned perfect Turkish. Every humiliation, every beating, every moment of powerlessness became fuel for what was coming. 20 years later, that hostage education would save his kingdom. But first came the moment that made war inevitable. In 1459, Ottoman envoys arrived at Târgoviște, demanding 10,000 ducats in tribute and 500 boys for the Janissary Corps. Vlad invited them to feast. When they refused to remove their turbans, citing religious custom, Vlad smiled. "Then let me help ensure they never fall off." His soldiers nailed the turbans to the envoys' skulls. The screaming lasted hours. The message was clear: Wallachia would bow to no one. What Mehmed didn't know was that this brutality wasn't random cruelty. Vlad had learned in the Ottoman court that extreme actions created extreme reactions. Fear, properly applied, could multiply a small force into something terrifying. Mehmed II wasn't just any sultan. This was the man who achieved the impossible, conquering Constantinople in 1453. The 1,000-year Byzantine Empire fell to his cannons and strategies. Christian Europe trembled. At 29, he commanded the world's most disciplined army and had never lost a major campaign. To him, Wallachia was an annoying pebble in his shoe, nothing more. He would crush this upstart prince and continue his march toward Europe's heart. But that winter of 1461 to 1462, something disturbing happened. Ottoman border forces started disappearing. Entire patrols vanished. Then came reports that made seasoned commanders nervous. 23,884 Turks and their sympathizers had been killed in Wallachian raids, not estimated counted. Vlad kept exact records. Bodies were found in their beds, at their posts, in their strongholds. The Impaler struck everywhere, then melted away. Here's where the numbers become staggering. Wallachia was a buffer state between Ottoman expansion and the Kingdom of Hungary. Its entire population barely reached 500,000. The Ottomans controlled territories from Anatolia to the Balkans, commanding millions. In any logical world, this conflict should have lasted days, not months. But Vlad wasn't playing by logical rules. He was writing new ones, rules written in psychological warfare and calculated terror. He understood that Wallachia couldn't win through strength, but through fear, through turning the land itself hostile. That was possible. Then came the moment that changed everything. Mehmed decided to end this personally, but when spring came, Mehmed assembled an army unlike anything Wallachia had ever seen. The Ottoman force that crossed the Danube in May 1462 defied imagination. Conservative estimates place it at 100,000 men. Some sources claim 150,000, others up to 300,000. What we know for certain, 120 massive cannons rolled north, the same type that shattered Constantinople's legendary walls. The baggage train stretched for miles, siege engines, supply wagons, mobile workshops. This wasn't a raid or punishment expedition. This was total conquest. The Janissaries formed the Iron Corps. These elite infantry, taken as children and raised solely for war, knew no fear and gave no quarter. 20,000 of the Sultan's finest, backed by Sipahi cavalry, irregular troops, and allied forces, Mehmed himself rode at their head, bringing his royal guard and personal household troops. The conqueror of Constantinople would accept nothing less than complete victory. But here's where Vlad's Ottoman education paid off. He knew Janissary discipline depended on routine and order. Disrupt that, and even elite troops became vulnerable. Against this tide, Vlad commanded perhaps 30,000 men, local militia armed with whatever they could find. Boyar cavalry minor nobles fighting for their lands, Hungarian and Moldavian mercenaries paid with promises, no cannons, no siege engines. Just desperation, local knowledge, and a commander who understood his enemy's psychology better than they understood themselves. But Vlad had learned something crucial during those hostage years. Large armies required massive supply lines. The Ottomans expected to live off conquered land, supplementing their supplies with local resources. So Vlad gave the order that would echo through history: burn everything. Granaries went up in flames. Wells were filled with corpses and filth. Cattle were driven into the mountains or slaughtered and left to rot. Every village in the Ottoman path became a ghost town. The earth itself turned hostile. This scorched earth wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. Vlad wanted the Ottomans hungry, thirsty, and increasingly nervous about what kind of enemy would destroy their own land rather than see it conquered. Then came the most diabolical part. Vlad had observed Ottoman camp hygiene during his captivity. He knew how disease spread in large armies, so he sent his own kind of soldiers into the Ottoman ranks plague carriers. Sick peasants, dressed in Ottoman clothing, speaking perfect Turkish, slipped into the massive camp. They shared water, food, stories. Within days, dysentery and fever began their invisible assault. What the scouts reported back was impossible, yet true. The mighty Ottoman army was already suffering before the first real battle. But these were hardened veterans. They'd campaigned from Belgrade to Baghdad. A little hardship wouldn't stop them, or so Mehmed believed. The Sultan's response shocked everyone. Instead of slowing down, he pushed harder, forced marches through the devastated landscape. His message was clear: Wallachian resistance would be crushed through sheer momentum. But hidden in the darkness, Vlad's scouts watched every move. Former Ottoman hostages who spoke perfect Turkish counted tents, noted positions, memorized routines. This is where the story takes its darkest turn. Vlad knew he couldn't match Ottoman numbers, but he didn't need to. He just needed to get close enough for one perfect strike. The planning began for something that defied all military logic: a direct assault on a force 5 times larger. But first, he needed intelligence that could only come from one source. As Mehmed's massive army crossed the Danube, they entered a landscape transformed into hell itself. Day 1 in Wallachia taught the Ottomans what kind of war this would be. The advance guard found the first village empty, doors swinging in the wind. Granaries stood as blackened shells. The well water stank of death. On the Orthodox church door, a message in Turkish: "Welcome to our land, leave while you can." By day 3 the pattern held, every settlement abandoned, every resource destroyed. The mighty Ottoman war machine, accustomed to feeding itself through conquest, found only ash and absence. Soldiers began grumbling. Where were the inhabitants? Where was the resistance? Then night fell, and they learned. Arrows whistled from darkness, finding gaps in armor. Sentries vanished without sound. Horses screamed as hidden pit traps swallowed cavalry patrols whole. By dawn, dozens were dead or missing, but no enemy bodies remained. Just arrows, traps, and growing fear. The Wallachians struck and vanished like ghosts. But the worst was yet to come. The plague carriers had done their work too well. By the end of the first week, thousands of Ottoman soldiers clutched their stomachs in agony. Fever spread through the ranks. The medical corps, overwhelmed, couldn't determine the source. Was it bad water, spoiled rations, or something more sinister? Imagine riding into a camp of 150,000 enemies, knowing that disease and fear already worked in your favor. An Ottoman soldier, let's call him Yusuf, wrote in a recovered diary, "The land itself fights us. My brother fell to marsh fever yesterday, Ahmed to an arrow in the night. We see no enemy army, yet we die by the dozens. The Christians have made a deal with devils." Here's the detail that still shocks historians. Vlad's spy network included former Janissaries, Ottoman Christians who'd escaped service, and Wallachians who'd lived in Turkish territories. They moved through the Ottoman camp like shadows, noting everything: guard rotation times, password patterns, the location of supply dumps, most crucially, where Mehmed placed his command pavilion. These weren't random guerrilla attacks. Each strike had purpose. Hit the gunpowder wagons to create fear of explosions, kill the officers to disrupt chain of command, poison the horse feed to cripple cavalry. Vlad wasn't trying to defeat the Ottoman army through these tactics. He was preparing them for something unprecedented. Then Vlad did something no one expected. On June 14th, he sent an envoy to Mehmed. The message was simple: "Meet me in open battle at Târgoviște. Let us end this with honor." The Ottoman generals laughed. Did this fool really think his 30,000 peasants could face the Sultan's might in open combat? Mehmed saw through the ploy. Vlad wanted to lure them to ground of his choosing. But the Sultan was confident. Let the Impaler choose his grave. What happened next defied all military logic. As the Ottoman army camped on June 16th, just 2 days from Târgoviște, Vlad made a decision that would echo through military history. He couldn't wait for the Ottomans to reach his chosen battlefield. The guerrilla tactics had weakened them, but not enough. He needed something decisive, something that would use Ottoman strength against itself. The Ottomans were about to learn what happens when you teach warfare to your enemies. Vlad gathered his boyar cavalry, 7,000 horsemen who knew this was likely suicide. But their prince had a plan based on intelligence so detailed, so specific, that it might just work. You see, during his captivity, Vlad had learned something crucial about Ottoman night protocols. There was a fatal flaw in their camp security, one that only someone who'd lived among them would know. But Vlad wasn't finished with his preparations. He needed to see the camp himself, to verify what his spies reported. What he did next was either brilliance or madness, perhaps both. He would infiltrate the Ottoman camp personally. Think about the audacity. A prince marking himself for certain death if caught, walking among 150,000 enemies. The plan was insane. Strike at night with a fraction of their force, create enough chaos to break Ottoman morale, target supplies, officers, and most importantly, spread panic. But first, Vlad needed to map the camp with his own eyes. This is where those 4 years of captivity would pay their ultimate dividend. As darkness fell on June 16th, Vlad prepared to do the unthinkable. The moment of pure genius was about to unfold. On the night of June 16th, Vlad prepared to do the unthinkable. Vlad donned the clothes of a Turkish merchant. His perfect Ottoman Turkish, learned through years of captivity, would be his shield. 6 of his best scouts, All Ottoman-speaking Wallachians joined him. They approached the massive camp as traders seeking the army's supply masters. The guards barely glanced at their forged permits. Why would they? Who would be insane enough to walk into certain death? Inside, Vlad's trained eyes catalogued everything. The janissary sections, marked by their distinctive tall tents. The supply wagons, grouped by type gunpowder here, food there. The horse lines, the paths between tent clusters. But most crucially, he noted the grand pavilion at the camp's heart. Mehmed's war tent soared above the others, marked by 3 golden crescents. Guards stood at measured intervals. Vlad counted steps, memorized faces, noted when they changed shifts. Then came the discovery that changed everything. The Ottoman night password system followed a pattern. Each section had its own phrase, but they all shared a common response. More importantly, in the darkness and chaos of such a massive camp, sentries relied on language more than actual recognition. Speak Turkish like a native, know the response, and you could move almost freely. Almost. What Mehmed didn't know was that Vlad had just solved the puzzle of attacking a force 5 times his size. The Ottoman camp's greatest strength, its massive size, would become its weakness. In daylight, organization and numbers made them invincible, but in darkness, in chaos, that was different. Back in the Wallachian camp, Vlad gathered his 7,000 cavalry. These weren't just soldiers, they were men who'd lost family to Ottoman raids, whose lands faced conquest. The priest blessed them, knowing most wouldn't see dawn, but then Vlad revealed his intelligence. They wouldn't charge blindly, they'd follow specific paths, hit exact targets. Groups of 500 would strike different sectors simultaneously. The goal wasn't to fight 150,000 men, it was to make 150,000 men fight themselves. Midnight approached. No moon. Vlad had chosen this night specifically. The cavalrymen wrapped their horses' hooves in cloth, muffling the sound. They blackened their armor to kill reflection. Each group leader carried a sketch of their sector, drawn from Vlad's reconnaissance. Primary targets, officer tents, marked by pennants. Secondary, supply wagons. Tertiary, create maximum chaos. Here's where it gets insane. The attack began not with a charge, but with infiltration. Vlad's Turkish-speaking scouts slipped past the sentries, using the passwords he'd learned. They reached the gunpowder wagons and set slow fuses, giving them time to escape before hell broke loose. Other infiltrators cut horse tethers, loosened tent stakes, and scattered caltrops along escape routes. Then, at exactly 1 a.m., 7,000 horses erupted from 7 directions. The Ottoman perimeter guards died before they could sound alarms. Crossbow bolts finding throats in the darkness. The cavalry burst through the outer defenses like a flood through a dam, and that's when the gunpowder wagons exploded. Fire and thunder shattered the night. Massive fireballs climbed skyward, turning night into hellish day for brief moments, before plunging the camp back into deeper darkness. Confused Ottomans stumbled from their tents directly into Wallachian lances. But here's the genius. The attackers screamed in Turkish, shouting conflicting orders. The Christians are in the east sector. Form ranks at the supply depot. The Sultan is under attack. In the darkness, Ottoman soldiers couldn't tell friend from foe. When they heard Turkish, they assumed allies. When they saw shapes in Ottoman gear stolen from earlier raids, they hesitated. That hesitation proved fatal. Janissaries rushing to defend their sultan collided with Sipahi cavalry, responding to different alarms. In the chaos, they started killing each other. The screams in Turkish and Romanian mixing created an audio nightmare. Orders contradicted orders. Officers shouted commands only to be cut down by unseen blades. Tents collapsed as their stakes were pulled, trapping men inside. Loose horses stampeded through the camp, adding to the chaos. The Wallachians had turned the Ottoman camp into a death trap of its own making. But the killing had only just begun. Vlad himself led the strike toward Mehmed's pavilion. This was the ultimate goal: kill the Sultan, and the invasion dies with him. 200 of Wallachia's finest cavalry formed a spear aimed at the camp's heart. They carved through confused defenders, guided by the tent positions Vlad had memorized. But wait, something was wrong. The pavilion loomed before them, exactly where it should be. The golden crescents gleamed in the firelight. Vlad's lance pierced the first guard. His sword found the second. They burst into the tent, weapons ready for the killing blow. But instead of Mehmed, they found his Grand Vizier scrambling for his sword. The Sultan had moved tents as a precaution, a habit from his campaign days. The moment of pure genius became near disaster. Janissaries, finely organized, converged on the pavilion. These elite troops didn't panic like the others. They formed a wall of steel and discipline. Vlad had minutes, maybe less, before being overwhelmed. He made the only choice sound, the retreat. Horns echoed through the burning camp, the signal for all groups to withdraw. But hidden in the darkness, the damage was already catastrophic. Supply wagons burned, officers lay dead, thousands of Ottomans had killed each other in confusion. The camp that went to sleep organized woke to apocalypse. As the Wallachian cavalry melted back into the night, they left behind more than death. They left doubt. If 7,000 could do this, what would happen when they reached Vlad's chosen battlefield? Dawn revealed the cost. 15,000 Ottomans lay dead, killed by Wallachians, by fire, by their own comrades in the confusion. Hundreds of supply wagons smoldered. The medical corps, already overwhelmed by disease, now faced thousands of wounded. But Mehmed lived, shaken, furious, but alive. The Janissary commander brought worse news. Among the dead were dozens of senior officers, irreplaceable veterans who knew how to manage such a massive force. What happened in those 3 hours would be debated for centuries. How did so few cause so much damage? The answer lay in psychological warfare perfected. Vlad had weaponized the Ottomans' own strengths against them. Their size became confusion. Their discipline became friendly fire when they couldn't identify enemies. Their confidence became vulnerability. The Sultan's response shocked everyone. Instead of retreating to regroup, he ordered an immediate march to Târgoviște. Mehmed understood the game now. Vlad had hurt them badly, but failed in his main objective. The Ottoman army still vastly outnumbered the Wallachians. If they could force a conventional battle, numbers would tell. Push through the pain, ignore the losses, and crush this troublesome prince once and for all. But Vlad had one more card to play. The night attack was never meant to defeat the Ottomans. It was meant to prepare them for something so psychologically devastating that even the conqueror of Constantinople would break. Everything, the guerrilla raids, the poisoned land, the night attack, had been orchestrated to bring the Ottomans to a specific mental state. Exhausted, demoralized, afraid. As dawn broke and Vlad's cavalry melted away, 15,000 Ottomans lay dead. But the true horror was yet to come. The march to Târgoviște became a death procession. Ottoman soldiers, exhausted from the night attack, stumbled through hostile terrain. No rest, no respite. Mehmed drove them forward. The Sultan understood delay meant death. Give the Wallachians time to regroup, to prepare more surprises, and his army might dissolve from fear alone. But what awaited them would shatter even his iron will. June 17th brought the first signs. Ottoman scouts reported something strange ahead, tall shapes on the horizon, too uniform to be trees. As the army crested the final hill before Târgoviște, the lead elements stopped so suddenly that ranks collided behind them. Hardened veterans who'd conquered cities from Belgrade to Baghdad stood frozen. Some fell to their knees. Others vomited. Before them stretched a forest of the dead. But these weren't trees. They were stakes. 20,000 wooden poles rose from the earth in perfect geometric patterns, and on each stake, the smell hit them first. In the summer heat, 20,000 corpses in various stages of decay created a stench that made brave men weep. The buzzing of millions of flies created an unholy drone, like the earth itself moaning. But the true genius was in the details. These weren't random victims. Vlad had arranged them by rank. Ottoman soldiers recognized uniforms, faces. There, a captain who'd disappeared on patrol. Here, a tax collector who'd vanished months ago. The stakes grew taller toward the center, creating an amphitheater of death, and at the highest point, on a stake that required special construction to raise, sat a figure that broke the Ottoman command. Hamza Pasha, Mehmed's favorite general and close friend, had been captured months earlier. The Sultan had assumed him ransomed or dead. But there he sat, impaled on the tallest stake, positioned so he seemed to survey the Ottoman army with dead eyes. His armor still gleamed, his beard was carefully groomed. Vlad had preserved him specifically for this moment, a message written in flesh and friendship. Picture what those Ottoman soldiers saw, a statement of absolute will. Each stake required hours to prepare. Each body had to be lifted, positioned. The geometric precision wasn't random. It showed planning, patience, terrible purpose. This wasn't battlefield brutality. This was psychological warfare elevated to art. The forest spoke a language only conquerors understand. This is what awaits you all. Mehmed rode forward, his face a mask. Contemporary accounts differ on his exact words, but the meaning was clear. A man who can do this to his own land, to anyone who opposes him, such a man cannot be conquered, only avoided. The Sultan who'd breached Constantinople's unbreachable walls, who'd never known true defeat, looked upon Vlad's masterpiece and understood something fundamental. Some victories cost more than defeat ever could. The Ottoman army began to crack. Whispers spread through the ranks. Was their own impalement waiting? Would they join this forest? Regular soldiers edged backward. Even janissaries muttered prayers. The image burned into every mind. 20,000 stakes, 20,000 warnings. And somewhere nearby, the man who'd orchestrated this waited with his remaining forces. Then came the sight that broke an empire's will completely. Children's voices rose from Târgovişte's walls, a church choir singing orthodox hymns. The contrast between innocent songs and the field of death created a cognitive dissonance that shattered morale. Vlad had orchestrated even this detail, knowing how the juxtaposition would affect minds already pushed to breaking. What happened next still disturbs historians. Mehmed II, the conqueror whose name made kings tremble, gave an order that shocked his entire command structure: retreat, not regroup, not probe for weakness, full retreat. The man who'd conquered Constantinople turned his army around. His stated reason: I cannot take the land from a man like this. Let him keep his throne. But his eyes, witnesses said, never left Hamza Pasha's elevated corpse. The retreat began as ordered withdrawal but became something closer to flight. Ottoman soldiers, convinced Wallachian devils waited in every shadow, abandoned supplies in their haste. The mighty army that had entered Wallachia as conquerors left as psychological casualties. Behind them, Vlad's forest of the dead stood as testimony to will triumphant over numbers. But hidden in those stakes was one final message. The bodies were arranged not just by rank, but by origin. Turkish soldiers here, Bulgarian allies there, Serbian conscripts beyond. Vlad had shown he knew exactly who served in Mehmed's army, where they came from, what would hurt most. The precision terrified as much as the brutality. This wasn't madness, it was method. The aftermath revealed something even worse. As Ottoman forces retreated, they found their path marked by new stakes, fresh bodies, stragglers who'd fallen behind, scouts who'd wandered too far. Vlad's 6,000 remaining cavalry harassed them constantly, adding to the forest one corpse at a time. The message was clear: the killing wouldn't stop at Târgoviște. In war, perception can be deadlier than swords. Vlad had created the ultimate fortress, one built in his enemy's mind. Every Ottoman soldier who survived would tell the tale. Every future invasion would remember the forest. The greatest victory wasn't in the bodies left behind, but in the fear carried forward. The man who conquered Constantinople turned his army around. But why? The full answer would only become clear as the implications rippled across Europe. Vlad had mastered something that changed warfare forever: psychological impact over physical destruction. Think about it. He never defeated the Ottoman army in conventional battle. He couldn't. but he defeated their will to fight, which proved far more effective. The forest of the dead became a mental barrier more impenetrable than any castle wall. Future Ottoman expeditions into Wallachia would remember Târgoviște and find reasons to campaign elsewhere. The strategic implications rippled across Europe. Mehmed's retreat didn't just save Wallachia, it bought crucial time for Hungary, Poland, and the Habsburg lands to prepare defences. The Ottoman expansion into Europe slowed, partly from this psychological check. When the unstoppable force met the immovable will, it chose to flow around rather than through. That's the detail that still shocks historians. One small principality's resistance altered the course of continental history. But Vlad wasn't finished. With 6,000 cavalry, he harassed Ottoman supply lines all the way to the Danube. Small groups struck at night, leaving stakes as calling cards. The mighty Ottoman army, which had entered Wallachia with drums beating and banners flying, slunk home diminished in both numbers and spirit. Constantinople's court poets, who usually sang of Mehmed's victories, fell silent about the Wallachian campaign. Consider what kind of man plans this level of psychological warfare. Vlad understood that defeating an empire required attacking its self-perception. The Ottomans believed in their inevitable expansion, their divine right to rule. The forest of the dead said otherwise. It declared that some men, some lands, would rather create hell on earth than submit. That message resonated far beyond military strategy. The long-term impact on European-Ottoman relations proved significant. Future sultans approached Balkan campaigns with new caution. The possibility of another Vlad, another forest, tempered ambitions. Wallachia became known as a graveyard for invaders, its reputation protecting it as much as any army. Sometimes the greatest fortress is the one built in your enemy's mind. And from this historical truth grew something unexpected. The Dracula legend. The man who'd saved Christian Europe through psychological warfare became, through centuries of retelling, something supernatural. But the real story surpasses fiction. Vlad Dracula didn't need vampiric powers. His understanding of fear, his willingness to weaponize terror, his ability to turn weakness into psychological strength, these proved more powerful than any myth. Remember, these weren't just soldiers who died at Târgoviște. They were messages, each one carefully chosen and placed. The precision in horror, the method in madness, that's what broke Mehmed. Not the brutality alone, but the intelligence behind it. When titans clash, the earth remembers, and the earth of Wallachia remembered in stakes and screams. 30,000 had indeed defeated 150,000, not through strength but through understanding that terror itself could be a weapon. Vlad had learned in Ottoman captivity that empires run on confidence. Shatter that confidence, make the cost of victory too psychologically expensive, and even conquerors retreat. The night when David didn't just defeat Goliath, he horrified him. Echoes through history as proof that numbers don't determine outcomes. Will does, understanding does. And sometimes the willingness to become worse than your enemy does. History pivoted on a single wrong turn in the darkness, when Vlad missed Mehmed's tent. Yet perhaps that failure ensured success. A dead sultan would be replaced, a traumatized sultan who ordered retreat. That created a legend that protected Wallachia for generations. In the end, Mehmed learned that some men cannot be conquered, only avoided, only feared, only remembered in the nightmares of empires.